I'm Camry, and I am your host today on the LDSart podcast. We have here Ash. So you come from a unique upbringing. Give us kind of some background on what makes you you and your story.
So I was born in Vladivostok, which is a city on the far east of Russia. It's like right by North Korea. I was placed for adoption by my mother, who was 16 at the time. She was too young to have me, and I was in an orphanage for 2.5 years. I ended up getting adopted by a Utah family. I lived in Utah pretty much my whole life since I was 18. I've just been on this healing journey now, realizing the abuse that I went through, trying to heal through it, and keeping Christ at the center of it all. I was abused as a kid. I was abused physically, emotionally, verbally, pretty much in every way. And when the older I got, I realized just like how crazy it was. For example, when I was on my mission, I was talking to the therapist there who was working with my companion, and he was just wanting to know who I was and stuff, and she had a case where she was like, I feel like my father abused me, and I was like, oh, that's terrible, and it really made me question my childhood, and this was the first time I really had, like, brought it to, like, maybe things weren't actually good. I always thought it, but I was like, I don't know, so I talked to him, and I kind of told him a few things, and I get this a lot with even therapists who have heard my story, and they're just crazy, like they should be in prison. And it's really sad because you never know, but I was giving him an example. I was like, well, yes, like he'd be like, sometimes I would be forced to just like sit in this closet. We had a closet in our garage, and there's no windows in it. There's just like this dark closet that had like a furnace in it, and as a kid, one of my punishments would be to just stand there for like hours, days, through the night.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah, and if I was to sit down, because I was little, like 7, if I was forced to sit down or something, my mom would come through the middle of the night and just be like, oh, now you have to stay there longer. And to me, I never realized as a kid that this wasn't normal. I get asked all the time, like, why didn't you get out? Why didn't you tell someone? Why didn't you do this? And it's like, I thought these were, like, legit punishments that every kid got.
It's all you knew.
So I wouldn't have been like, oh, yeah. And I even thought about this just the other day, was that I was too embarrassed to tell anybody the abuse that I went through because I genuinely thought I was a bad kid. So I didn't want to go to my friends or something and be like, oh, I got in trouble and this is what happened, because no kid wants to tell their friends they're in trouble, And so it is sad because I remember very vividly going to middle school, and, in Utah they have those people come and they talk about abuse, right? And they're like, if any of you are going through this, like, come tell a teacher, da-da-da. And I remember just being, oh, good thing I'm not abused, And I look back and I'm like, wow, yeah, no, I was,
Oh, yeah.
So
what advice would you give your 10-year-old self if you could go back?
That's a good question. I feel like I would just tell them, number one, probably get help, but if that is not, like, in a lot of these abuse situations, it's really hard to get help. It's really hard to be able to trust people because a lot of times the people who you trust are the ones who are abusing you, right? But I would just say, don't give up. In whatever situation you're in, hard times or not, like, if I could talk to my younger self, I would just say, like, keep trying, keep going, like, do what you can to get the help that you need if it's possible, and just, like, don't stop believing in God. Don't base, like, your parents or your abuser's actions on your relationship with the important people in your life, like God and with Christ.
What would you say has been the biggest factor in your healing? Like, what has helped you the most?
I would say Christ and his atonement. I feel like for me, because I have a really hard time sometimes with my emotions, like, I can't, like, understand how I'm feeling because I wasn't taught to do that. I was neglected so much. I feel like, to me, just being able to know that Christ has felt everything and he knows where I'm at, and he knows at what level I'm at too with different things. He knows, like, hey, maybe she's not good at expressing her feelings or expressing her emotions, to other people, but what he does know is how I receive love and how I receive the things that I do need to heal,
Yeah. I heard this quote the other day that basically said, you are not the darkness you endured. You are the light that refused to surrender. What do you think about that?
It really makes me think a lot about the light that each one of us have. And what's sad is that I feel like everyone at some point in their life is put in a dark room where they are not allowed to shine. You know, we all have trials and hardships, and we feel like we're stuck in a dark room, but we all still have that light. And it kind of reminds me of this analogy, I believe that's what you'd call it, that you're kind of going through this like dark tunnel, right? And it's like the path back to home, back to where we want to go, you know? And it's dark, and we're all just like walking towards the light. And the closer we get to the light, we kind of see like all of these flaws in us, right? Because it's kind of like the light's shining at us, and it's kind of showing us like, oh man, like I'm not good at this, or like, oh man, this is happening. Like all these hard things are getting shown, right? And we still keep going and going, and we're getting closer to the light. And that light is Jesus Christ. And I feel like that light is showing us who we really are, and it's lighting the way for other people. And we're, you know, and so we're all going through this dark tunnel, trying to get back to the main source of light where, you know, my light can help others and other people's lights can help us. And sometimes we look back at the light and we're like, oh, it's not perfect or whatever, but that light is still who we are. It's still so important, and it adds value to so many people and even ourselves, because it's helping us get back to where we need to go, you know?
Yeah. I think that's like so inspiring to think you can go through so much trauma and turn it in a way that you're, you know, sharing it with other people and allowing them to, you know, work through their trauma and maybe come to light with some of the things that they could be going through. And I love that you use your platform for that, and choosing to, you know, bring light to topics that aren't easy to discuss, and you can share more of your story and touch more hearts that way. I think that's great. So at LDSart, we obviously sell a variety of Christ-centered art to get Christ in front of as many people as we can, and share the light of Christ in people's homes. We asked you to pick out some of your favorite that resonated most with you and your story. Tell us which ones you picked and why they resonate with you.
Yeah, so one of them, I'm not sure the name, but it was a little child in a bed, and there's an angel.
Watchers in the Night.
Watchers in the Night, yes. This one particularly stood out to me because it kind of brought me back to my childhood, honestly. There were many days and nights where I'd go to bed just like terrified for my life, or I wouldn't really even get that much sleep because I was so afraid of my parents coming in and doing something, you know? And I kind of like see that picture and put myself as a little girl in that picture of having been through such an awful childhood, and realizing that there were most likely angels surrounding me and keeping me safe and protecting me. And I feel like, to me, it's so touching because you read scriptures, you know, a lot with Jesus Christ and how he feels about children in general, you know, and that picture just is so beautiful to me because he loves children so much, and he would do anything to protect those little kids. And I get asked a lot of like, well, where was God during, you know, your horrible time? And like, if God really did love you and he's, quote, sending angels to you, you know, like, where were they when you were going through, you know, 18 years of all of this? You know, and I think that's such a hard question to answer, but I do believe that we have our agency, and there's only so much God can do, right? Because I have my own choices, and God's not going to, you know, sit there and be like, you have to do this. We're all learning, we're all like on the same path, you know, but he sends little things and miracles like angels who maybe we can't see, and maybe who we can see, who help us influence us later in life. And I just think that's a beautiful reminder of that.
The other piece you chose was Comfort by Young Sun Kim. Tell us a little bit about that painting and what resonates with you.
Yeah, I also thought this was such a beautiful photo. And what stuck out to me was, I believe in that picture, he's embracing a lamb, right? Or sheep or whatever. I don't know what it's called. And I loved this because for me, sometimes it is really hard to express my emotions, like I said. And for me, if I were to ever see the Savior, I feel like that is what it would look like, is an embrace, a hug, you know, something like that where not a lot needs to be said, because he knows everything I went through, and he knows who I am, and he knows what I want to be in life and where I want to go, and he is there to just help me feel loved, right? I feel like
Right.
that's what he's there for, and I love that because I feel like through the picture I can just feel like that love. And I love the colors in it because it makes you kind of happy,
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, like, when we are desperately needing Christ, I feel like we turn to him a lot in, like, desperation and when we're
Mm-hmm.
going through hard
Yeah.
things, right? But I feel like it always reminds me too to turn to him even when we're having those really good days and to thank him and to love him because his love is so happy and it's like joy. Russell M. Nelson just barely in conference spoke a lot about joy, and the joy that we would feel that the Savior is coming and even a lot of other talks, and I loved that because I just think a lot of us go through so many hard things that we forget that joy is possible. Like
Mm-hmm.
I went through a phase right when I got married and I had my kids, that I just felt like I was never happy. And sometimes I still feel that way, but I just felt like I was just like barely scraping by. I was like, I'm just trying to get through this. Like, I'm not happy. I'm just like surviving, and I just love that his love brings joy, and you can feel joy and you can still have grief at the same time. That's what's so awesome about his atonement.
Yeah. I love that you said, turn to him even on the days that are going well and there is joy, and thanking him for that. I think that that's a good reminder for everyone. How do you use your platform to share with other people and uplift them and encourage them to share their own stories?
Yeah, I'm always shocked when I do come out and just share little tidbits of my life, how many people will always message and be like, wow, I'm going through the same thing, or wow, like, I really needed this today. And I love that because I think so many people have such amazing stories and come from, such crazy backgrounds and stories that just make them who they are. And I think sharing your story gives you so much power. And I think for me, I've realized that what I did go through was pretty awful and, it's very unique. But when I share it, I feel like I hold the power and that, like, my parents or, like, people who have done me wrong in the past, like, don't have that power over me.
Mental health and suicide is a huge topic in modern society. What would you say to someone who's going through it?
Oh, I I don't know. I feel like it is unfortunately really common these days to go through those feelings, especially with teens and even younger kids. I mean, this is statistics of, little kids like who are my son's age, like
Mm-hmm.
7 to 12. Like, it's heartbreaking how young they are now, where we're having to teach them those things. I don't remember being that young, being taught
Mm-hmm.
that. Um, but I think just teaching our kids young what really matters in life.
Yeah.
And I don't think those who have suicidal thoughts or things like that they don't know what's wrong or, what matters in life, I would say. But it's more like, I think if we focused our lives more on what truly mattered and let that anchor when we are having those tough moments and we do feel alone and we do feel like it is the end, knowing that we do have a savior and we do have someone who is constantly there for us. I feel like a huge problem with, you know, people feeling so low is they just feel alone. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like everyone nowadays just feels so alone because the world is incredibly fake. Everyone's pretending to be somebody they're not. Everybody's just pretending to be perfect and it gets really lonely. And I think if we could really just see like this is actually what matters and put your faith and all of your thoughts and feelings into that.
Mm-hmm. How has your past influenced how you parent?
It's a great question. I feel like being a mom was I feel like being a mom is actually what led me more into my healing journey
Mm-hmm.
because I was not aware of the significance of my abuse or even that I was really like that heavily abused. I knew my parents were not nice, but I never knew to what degree. And so when I had my firstborn, things started to come out of like, oh, like I was extra like, oh, what's the word? Like, I was just like really crazy in the sense that I was like, fight or flight.
Mm-hmm.
I was constant like, oh no, what about this? Oh, like, and there was just like small things I started to realize like, I don't think this is normal as a mom, and just as slowly as my kids have gotten older, I've really had to like step back and just be like, okay, this is the way that I want to be a mom. And like, if I could go back to my childhood and, wish for that perfect mom, this is what I would do. And it is really hard for those of us who do not have good parental, examples. It really is, because being a parent is like, I feel like one of the most important things you could possibly be, and it's hard when you don't have that example of like how to give your kids love and, all the things that they need emotionally and stuff. And so right now I feel like I'm still learning. My kids are still pretty young. But it gets better the more I rely on Christ and I use that atonement to heal, the child within me, because it's extremely hard to be a good parent when you just didn't have good parents, And so I think prayer has really been a huge thing for me, going to the temple for peace, because kids are crazy and they
Being a mom is hard.
Yes, and they trigger me so much. And, I just have to sometimes step back and just be like, okay, like I'm having a moment. I'm going to just step back. I'm going to count to 5, do whatever I got to do, And so I really tried to find those times of peace. So like I will go to the temple as much as I can, at least once a week, so that I can experience peace and like get my head back on track,
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about your background and everything that you've been through. What is probably the biggest takeaway that you would give to share with your audience?
I think that you can't always choose where you come from. Most of the time, you can't choose where you come from, but you can choose where you're going. And you can't, choose the hardships and the trials that you're given, but you can choose what you do with them. Like, you hold the power. So for anyone who is listening to this and thinking like, yeah, I am going through a really hard time right now. Like, yeah, like I also grew up with a lot of violence in the home, and now I am like suffering because of their actions, I want to validate that first and say, yeah, you're right. It is sucky for sure. It's terrible and it's unfair. But what you can do is not give them the power to win. If we stay silent and if we aren't speaking up, then we give them the power to win. And you can always just change that and move forward and do good, I feel like, knowing that you can move forward and you can heal and you can be a power in the world and share the goodness that's within inside of you, because no matter what you go through and the hardships that you have, if you have Christ with you as the center of everything you do, there's always going to be good that's brought from it, always.
Well, thank you so much for joining us here today at LDSart. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.